Having made a host of unrealistic promises and failing to fulfill them for 4.5 years, the APNU+AFC is back in your communities. There is this newfound love for the people of Guyana. Here in Region 5 and 6, one of those areas that you're going to see the APNU+AFC coming to you with more promises, having failed to do anything whatsoever for you over the past, since 2015. I have with me in studio here two former members of Parliament, Nigel Dharamlall, who is also a Central Committee and Executive Committee member of the People's Progressive Party, and Mr. Joe Hamilton. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daddy.
I preface this program by talking about the failed promises of the APNU+AFC and the, if you want to term it, disappearance after 2015, where members of communities across the country were having extreme difficulty in getting access to those who were elected to office, and we are seeing them back in communities now. I understand they're coming to the Berbice area pretty soon. Nigel, I'm going to give you the first shot at highlighting, most importantly, the challenges that the people of Berbice would have been facing over the past 4.5 years.
Well, Eddie, thank you, and good evening to our viewers. I am a born resident of Region 5, West Berbice in particular, and over the last 4.5 going on to 5 years since the Granger regime has been in government, they have devastated Region 5 and they have devastated Berbice as a whole. The rally that they will have, I think Wednesday, they are going to speak glowingly about all of their achievements. But the report card for Berbice and especially for Region 5, under this government, the APNU+AFC government, is one that leaves much to be desired. Agriculture, for example, is the main economic activity in Region 5, particularly the rice sector and sugar. And we are now aware that sugar is producing less than 90,000 metric tons per year across the industry. The entire sugar sector in Berbice has been decimated. So thousands of jobs, in excess of 5,000 jobs, have been lost in the sugar sector in Berbice. Rice, Region 5, and particularly West Berbice, the biggest rice growing area in our country, touching nearly 100,000 acres per crop. That is in serious turmoil. The cost of production has increased tremendously because of the hardship taxes, including VAT on machinery and spares, on other types of equipment in the rice sector, on fertilizer and chemicals. We have problems of in the cattle industry. Region 5 and West Berbice particularly also, it is the biggest cattle rearing industry area in our country. And the cattle sector, because of the problems of drainage and irrigation in Region 5 over the last number of years, because of the inaction of this government and the incompetence of this government as well, we have found that the cattle sector as well is in devastating form. We have also seen loss of jobs in the spin-off industries or sectors as a result of the fallout of rice, sugar, cattle. We have seen when you go around in villages in Region 5, the problems and the faces of children suffering as a result of their parents not being able to take care of them properly. And I think that what we need now is not promises in Region 5 that this government will come and whitewash all of their incompetent actions towards the people of Region 5. What we require now are concrete actions to move our region forward.
Joe, I want to bring you in here in terms of some of the other actions we know about the difficulties. Nigel would have highlighted some of them with regards to the agriculture and other sectors, but I understand that businesses are suffering as a result of these actions in Berbice. Then you have issues in the education sector where parents are struggling to send their kids to school, and thereby preventing children from having equal access to education.
The issue is, Eddie, as Granger and his merry band traveled to West Berbice Wednesday, I'm told, all the villages, the people in those villages, the question to be asked, are your lives better now than it was before May 2015? And that the answer that would come back would be a resounding no. And therefore, I don't know what Mr. Granger could say to people again, what other new promises he could take to them, or we see these now. He to whitewash his incompetence. He has this thing about the PPP left a basket for him to fetch water or some nonsensical thing like that. But the issue is, you were in government for the 5 years. What have you done? I mean, parents should ask themselves, the fact that they took away the $10,000 cash grant for your children, and they said they will substitute the bees for all the villages, or most of the villages rather, in Region 5 and West Berbice. The question, in the period, have the buses stopped in your village to transport your children? And the answer to that question would be no for most of the villages, because it is just selective villages they have where these buses take children to school. The farmers there should ask the question, why did you make it so difficult for us? Because you know, many of the farmers who were given land under the PPP, one of the first acts Mr. Granger did was to reclaim the lands from the farm. You would know there are many cases in the court where Dharamlall had to go and fight for these farmers to ensure that their land were not repossessed by this government. Is good. And all the cases in that regard, the government has lost regarding. So the people must ask, is this healthcare system at Myconi and Fort Wellington, is it better? No. The answer to that question is no. Because you go to the hospitals now, drugs and medical supplies are unavailable. And so if you look at all the sectors, people have suffered, people have lost their jobs, as indicated by Nigel earlier. And therefore, what can Mr. Granger really say to these people? What could he say? I suspect his conversation would be to blame the PPP, that it was the PPP that was responsible for him, for his incompetence. But that is not so. He is responsible for his own incompetence. The PPP left government since May 2015. You, Mr. Granger, you were in government for that period. And therefore, the fact that you fail to deliver goods and services to the citizen, it is on your watch. It is not a Jagdi or Ramatar watch. And so I am still trying to put my mind around what he's likely to say. What can he say when he goes to Berbice? Of course, he will go to go with the conversation about he's promising the decade of development. But you judge, if for 5 years you were a total inept leader, why would the citizens of this country in Berbice or any place give you another 10 years? You have already proved that you cannot deliver. And so the people of Berbice, they must ask themselves these questions, and they have the answers. As I said, is your life better now than it was before Granger took government? And the answer to that question, all Berbice know, is no.
But Joe, you made a point of this new argument, because I can recall in 2015 this was the first argument that was put up by the coalition about the treasury being empty and there is no money to do anything. Then subsequently we saw huge increases in their salaries of ministers and so forth. We have seen corruption as somehow seems to be a hallmark of this government, with a number of cases. Nigel, I want to bring you in here. You can't claim there is no money, but you increase your salaries and you have money to spend on a number of projects, all that are clouded in corruption.
I think the signature project, the most corrupt project in the first year of this regime, has been the fiasco at Dharamlall, where more than $600 million of taxpayers' monies they have been, up until today, unable to account for. And that is, coupled with very many others, the drugs bond scandal, the 400 and something million dollars, 600 million importation of drugs above the usual costs. We've had cases of ministers themselves involved directly in procurement without the procurement commission. We've had cases where ministers are hand-picking contractors. We've had cases of overseas bank accounts with millions of US dollars. So corruption is actually a legacy of Granger. He has overseen a government over the last 4.5 years that has decimated this economy. When they came into government, we had in excess of $100 billion equivalent in gold reserves. That is, I think, 500 million Guyana dollars now. They've basically spent out the gold reserves. We've had over $5 billion in the Forestry Commission. They have spent all of that. Now the Forestry Commission cannot pay their own employees. We've had billions of dollars in the accounts of GGMC. All of that has been spent out by this regime. We've had, when they came into government, liquidity in our system in excess of 700 million US. That has been spent out. We now have the last report out of Bank of Guyana is that the overdraft of this government at Bank of Guyana is over 75 billion Guyana dollars. That is touching nearly 400 million US. We also know that the foreign debt that we have in our country since this government came into office has gone beyond 1.3 billion. The debt to that, and that is US dollars, the debt to the commercial banks in Guyana has gone beyond $500 million. So when you add up all of the public debt in our country, we are way beyond the 2.1 billion when the PPP came into office in 1992. And what else we have is a currency. The Guyana dollar has, as you know, has been devalued. We are now paying out of our noses on the exchange rate market. So things have become expensive as a result. So what can Mr. Granger do to rebuild the economies, the regional economies? What can he do to rebuild the national economy? He has no vision. He has no plan. Even the decade of development that Joe referred to, that Granger has been speaking about since the launch of their rally, their campaign, it does not define any single action that will move the country forward. It does not speak about how they will create jobs for young people, how they will create opportunities for the students coming out of school. It does not speak about how they will rebuild the productive sectors in our country. They speak sparingly of the oil and gas sector, but you know that the contracts that they have negotiated in the oil and gas sector, those have become a national embarrassment and a national disaster. Guyana will not benefit in the near term or even in the medium term because of the contracts that this government signed and put in place. So our taxpayers, the future of this country, will be burdened by any other day that Granger remains in office. We will continue to be burdened by public debt. We will continue to be burdened by rising crime. We will be continue to be burdened by joblessness. So, if, for example, he has not done anything in 5 years, it has to be some Houdini politics. He has to be a magician to suddenly turn around this economy. But he has shown no evidence that he is able to manage his country to the benefit of all of the people of Guyana. That is a significant problem that I have with Granger.
I want to bring you back to Berbice because I think it's important for us to examine. You talk about a lot of monies being spent. Joe, you've been going to Berbice as well a lot and would have been interacting with persons both in Region 5 and Region 6. What is there to show in Berbice of the investment, any investment if there is, from the coalition?
The thing is, in the case of Region 6, and Nigel will tell you, the PPP had to put in place social programs to help families feed their children. So, and the General Secretary, in one of his presentations in New York, he made a point that he never thought he would have seen hunger returning to this country. But the reality is the fact that Granger sent thousands of men and women on the breadline created conditions where parents were unable to send their children to school. In many instances because they were unable to put something in their lunch kits. And therefore, and the government through the social service department did not step in to fill that vacuum. Our comrade up there, Adriana and Amaya and the other comrades, they have had to put in place programs and other NGOs to help to ensure children can eat to go to school. And so that is Granger's legacy, that bringing back hunger to our people, to our children. So what has happened? The hospital, we hear about all the tragic situation about drugs and medical supplies. The pensioners, they have to use the little pension they collect to buy drugs because they're unable to get it through the public health system. And so when you look across the spectrum, Region 5, Region 6, and I mentioned earlier about Granger and his government taking away lands from, productive lands for that matter, from farmers. And whilst he's doing that, they're handing over thousands of acres of lands to people who are cronies of the government. In one instance, the man who they had brought the case, the first case after the no confidence motion, he was gifted 12,000 or something like that acres in Region 6. And we just learned the other day, another crony received 10,000 acres of land in Region 5. 10,000 acres of land, Reggie, if you care about the people of Region 5, Mr. Granger, I can give you an idea to take to the people of Region 5. Reclaim that 10,000 acres of land and hand it over to 500 households, 20 acres. And that would be honest, because the man has 10,000 acres of land that is not productive. He has said that in the first instance, he collected the land via forestry agreement through the Forestry Commission, and what he sought to do, he did nothing with it under the Forestry Commission activity, and now they have transferred it into agricultural activities. And so what has happened? What has happened as education sector, health sector, the commercial sector, productive sector, rice, the farmers should ask Mr. Granger why they were unable to get $9,000 per bag for their paddy, as was promised by his government when they were in opposition, when they were seeking to get into government. And so we can see, and we have the track record to prove it, we say to the mothers and to the parents of region 5 and 6, that we will reinstitute the cash grant for children.
Right.
And we have the evidence that it happened before. So anything we talk about, we can point to this success story, and that grant, we will increase it over the period up to $50,000 per child, starting from the $10,000. If the PPP were in government, the children now would have been receiving $50,000, and every parent would have been receiving $50,000 per child. The fact is they have nothing, and so we'll have to restart that. The production of rice and the intervention, and Nigel would know more than I do, there were some specific interventions from the PPP government to help the rice industry and to sustain it, in the area of whether it's fertilizer and the way we dealt with the old tax regime and that kind of thing. And all of that went out the window when the government, when this government came into place. So I am still pondering as to what Mr. Granger can say to the people he did for them, firstly, and secondly, what he can commit to do if, God forbid, he gets back into government.
Nigel, I want to bring you in here because Joe touched on a few of what the PPP intends to do in terms of, for example, the cash grant and so forth. Unemployment or employment opportunities in Berbice, particularly Region 5 and 6, well, mainly Region 6, but to some extent Region 5, it's a big issue. Issues of increase in land rentals for farmers and so forth. Access to land in these regions as well are some of the major issues affecting the people in Berbice here, as well as health related issues, access to medicines and so on. Could you lay out in the shortest possible time, if I should put it that way, some of the direct interventions from the PPP?
Well, certainly. Some of these interventions are going to be national, but they will have regional impact, positive impact. One of the first things that we will do is that we will remove the hardship taxes that this government placed on this nation when it came into office, and during every year at their budget time. So land rent, for example, you know that they have increased it from 3,000 plus to in excess of $15,000 per acre in Region 5, for example. We will have to have that reduced so that farmers can go back to the land and they can make money engage in rice production. We would have to also start putting money back into drainage and irrigation. The lifeblood of agriculture is drainage and irrigation. This government last year removed $1 billion from the D&I budget of our country. So we will have to focus on rebuilding the drainage and irrigation infrastructure. We will also have to make sure that those sugar estates that this government ill-advisedly closed, that those sugar estates can be reopened so quickly people become employed. It is not for us just about the profit of Gaisuko. For us, it is about the economic impact that the sector has on the economy. And so when people get jobs, money starts to flow in the economy, and the corresponding benefits are derived. We will also have to make sure that our young people get greater access to certification, educational opportunities. So we have said that in our period when we get back into government, at least 20,000 students will be able to access online education in Guyana. So the monies that parents would have to pay to send children to for boarding and lodging or for accommodation elsewhere, they can now stay at home and attend the University of Guyana via online services. We would also have to diversify from some of the things that Mr. Granger continues to speak about, but he has done nothing about. And that is the information communication technology area in our country. We would have to ensure that regions 5 and 6 benefit from it. We would also have to make sure that, as Joe said, focus on health and education so that every hospital, every health clinic, every health center is fully stocked with drugs and medical supplies, the best doctors. We will have to start retraining our doctors as well. We will also have to make sure that the health professionals, he remove them from contract and put them onto an establishment that is of no benefit to them. So we have to make sure that the benefits for our health professionals are restored as well. So those, in a nutshell, are some of the things that we would like to see done. The rice sector specifically for Region 5, I think one of the things we'd have to do is to look at a rice price stabilization mechanism, so that farmers can get a good price for their rice, especially when the international market, the prices are low. Farmers can get good prices. We'd have to look at the oil and gas sector and manage it well, so that Guyanese people can benefit. This government does not have a local content legislation. They do not have local content policies to guide the oil and gas sector. That is the main way of our economy participating in the oil and gas sector. So we will have to make sure that we have good legislation, good policies, so that the Guyanese businesses can participate in the oil and gas sector.
Joe, the APNU+AFC is heading to Berbice, I think you said Wednesday. You suspect that they're going to go with more promises, having failed to fulfill any of their promises to the people of Berbice or anywhere else in this country over the past 4.5 years. What do you want to say to the people, particularly in Region 5, who are being encouraged to go out to hear about the decade of development and the plans and programs that the next the APNU+AFC intends to implement once re-elected? What do you want to say to the people in Berbice?
Eddie, I count on the intelligence of the Guyanese people, regardless where they reside. And the fact is that when I started off, I put some questions out there, and those questions are still relevant. And so I see these elections coming as a pocketbook elections, where people, having had the opportunity to see the PNC in government, they are now at a better place to compare. They didn't have that opportunity in 2011, 2015. Then now in 2020, they have that opportunity. And most, if not all of the people, except for the cronies and the people in the cabal, they would tell you that they have lost welfare. They have lost earning. They have not increased their earning. They have not increased their economic situation. People have lost. And therefore, for the people, they know better. Of course, you have the fanatical type who some of them would say to you, they rather be oppressed by the people. You know, they would rather be oppressed by the PNC than to vote for the PPP. Some people, that madness is there, and so those you can do nothing with. But there are persons who are sane, who are sound, who recognize that this government has not contributed to their development and their children's welfare in the period. And therefore, I'm sure they would not even go to listen to Mr. Granger, no matter how much they try to encourage them to go, because they know that it will just be some fluff and buff, and that has no substance. And you can say a lot of things about Mr. Granger, but he is skillful in the art of making fluff and bluff presentable. He is skillful in promoting form without substance. That skill he has. I mean, he's incompetent in all the other areas, in delivering, in executing, but as regards presenting nothing, he knows how to do it. Nigel has just spoken about he's presenting his decade of development. And he's also able to, every period, as fast as you forget something, he brings a new phraseology. I mean, it is a very deceitful skill, and as I said some time ago, that's why I call it, he's the charlatan extraordinaire. He will present something, he hasn't fulfilled it. he hasn't articulated fully how he's going to execute it. And before you blink, he throws something else at you. So just a couple months ago, he was throwing at us the Green State Strategy. By the time he reached the campaign launch, he's throwing at us the decade of development. I'm sure before March the 2nd, he will find some other, thing to throw at us. And therefore, that is what. But ask him to take it to conclusion as to how that will deliver benefit to the people of Guyana. And he's incapable to do that.
Nigel, you wanted to make a point, and I interrupted with regards to, I recognize the fact that one of the areas, because a lot of the folks in Berbice are part of the military and paramilitary, and they too would have had their challenges.
Yeah, certainly. Region 5 especially, and West Berbice more specifically, lots of the members of the armed forces originate from that area. And this government basically took away their bonus, their yearly bonus that they used to get under the PPPC government. We would like to see the bonus for our soldiers and the rest of the joint services be restored. We will restore it as soon as we get back into government. That has taken away hundreds of millions of dollars from the pockets of our men and women in uniform. We would, and we have to rebuild Region 5 and 6. For example, Joe, the bauxite industry. It was the PPPC government that developed when J.P. Knights left Guyana when Hoyt had brought them in. The PPPC government was the one that transformed what Araima and so forth in the bauxite industry, Ollendorf, and we were able to rebuild the bauxite industry, creating hundreds of jobs, possibly thousands of jobs. Now, what have we seen? 500 jobs in Berbice, in the bauxite industry, are on the breadline again. Jobs are being lost all the time in Regions 5 and 6, and that again, joblessness is a legacy of David Granger.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening to discuss issues that are affecting the people of Berbice. And I want to thank you, Berbicians, for joining us. And of course, you have something to think about as you make your decision. First and foremost, to put questions to the Granger. Joe has a way of describing them. The APNU+AFC people, I don't want to use your term of describing them, where they come to you and to reject them completely in terms of not supporting a party that has done nothing for you. So I want to thank you very much for joining us, and have a good rest of the evening. Bye for now.